Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Welcome back. We have been talking about the life of Jesus. The life of Jesus. How we should and how we can live. Today we're going to be talking about the story of Lazarus and the rich man. Okay, that's found in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. Lazarus and the rich man. Okay. If you don't know this, if you look at Luke's gospel, this story, this parable, a lot of scholars consider it a parable, not just a story, even though it's not strictly labeled or called a parable by Jesus. But if the truth of the matter is, if you want to know something, this parable is the third in a trilogy. It's the third in a trilogy. So, what do I mean? In Luke chapter 15, what do we have? We have the parable of the prodigal son. And we talked about that and we mentioned that and we did a study on it. There was like 4 parts on that. There's a lot of stuff in there. But primarily, we see the initial part of the prodigal son is what? God reconciling man back to himself. Now, yeah, man to man is in there too, but everything starts and rolls up with what? God reconciling man to himself first, okay? And what I love about that, even that story, remember, right? It's the father that went to the son, even though the son was coming back, but he had, remember, he had in his own mind, he had something rehearsed, calling himself, you know, one of my father's servants, perhaps, or hire me, blah, blah, blah. And we talked about that. And go back and you can see our YouTube channel, Grace and Passion. Just look for my last name in there and you'll see the parables and the teachings, okay? Then we have in the beginning of the 16th chapter here in Luke, we have the parable of the unjust steward. The unjust steward really is about man's relationship toward God, receiving, trusting in God's unmerited favor, despite man's own faultiness and error. Did you get that? The parable of the unjust steward is man's relationship towards God, receiving, trusting in God's unmerited favor despite man's own faultiness and error. And then finally, here we are arriving on the scene of Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. And really, the paramount of this story, similar to the Good Samaritan, which we did a study on, man's relationship to man. For some people and for some of us, the parable can create an uneasiness and actually even a misunderstanding. And really, the uneasiness comes as a result of the misunderstanding. It's basically like this. Some people read this story, they read this parable. Well, if you're comfortable here, like you've had a decent home and you've had a good job or a decent job, guess what? If you're comfortable here and you're not living on the streets. If you're comfortable here, well, hell awaits you. And listen to me. Those are misunderstandings. Those things are not true. That's not true at all. And the other caveat is, well, if you're homeless here in this world, in this life, heaven is guaranteed. Well, that's not what the story is about either, and that's not what Jesus is really teaching. When we look at the life of Jesus and you read the Gospels, we can, and sadly we do a little bit more often than we should, we pull out sections, right? We pull out things, okay? And really, I mentioned that Mark has clusters. Well, all the writers really have clusters, right? Luke has clusters that he's writing in, okay? And you see the 16th chapter, but you could You could put the cluster of the 15th chapter, especially the prodigal son, the lost coin, into this chapter here, okay? Lazarus had a hard time here, and as a result, he will enjoy good times in heaven. The rich man had a good life on earth and will therefore automatically spend an eternity in hell. Well, friends, that's not what this story is about. That's a misunderstanding. That is not true. Okay, that's not what that is about at all. Let's get to it. Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. This is easily going to be a two-part study, and I think you need to come back. It's very important. There's a lot of stuff to learn in here. Let's go. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. Clothed, fine, and purple. Luke, Jesus is telling the story, right? In purple, fine linen, feasted sumptuously. You got three things there. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. For I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, child. Other translations, son. Remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm, a great divide, has been fixed in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, then I beg you, Father. Recognizes his father, right? To send him, who? Lazarus, right? To my father's house. For I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest or in case they also come into this place of torment. But Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, no, Father Abraham. Notice he calls him Father Abraham. But if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to them, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. And this is key. We're going to be touching on it, Moses and the prophets, right? Because people think that there was not enough in there, okay? There was. We're going to get that. Neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Okay. 3 observations from this parable. 3. Okay, you ready? You got pen and paper? 3 observations from this parable. Now, I said a lot of those things in the beginning, and we read through the story, but you may say to yourself, yeah, but, the rich man was comfortable here, and eternal suffering awaited him. Lazarus didn't have it good here. Eternity in heaven's waiting him. No, the parallels are drawn with these things in view because Jesus is trying to tell us something else. Remember, Jesus goes to heights and lengths to paint the picture immediately so we begin to grasp what he's trying to say and what he's trying to teach us and how we should live and how we can live. 3 observations. You ready for them? 3 observations of this story, this parable. 1, there is an afterlife. Not there might be, there is an afterlife. And there's no further, this story it's clear, This story is absolutely probably one of the most outstanding, clairvoyant, very direct, very clear reality that there is an afterlife. Number two, it also points out this: there is an eternal separation with suffering. There is one. I'm not saying there isn't, there is one. Number three, there is an eternal rest with God and those that are His. Those that are His. Now, why do you say that right away? Because remember, it's Abraham that He winds up in His bosom. So there's going to be others there, not just God, but others. We observe immediately within this story, within this parable, if you notice carefully, there are two banquets, right? There is a banquet each day the rich man believes he deserves. On the other side, in eternity, a banquet exists in which Lazarus is graciously welcomed. We're going to get to this, but there's a banquet that awaits us in eternity. Obviously, he could not earn it in the strictest sense of the word. Lazarus could not earn it. So in reality, it's a picture of grace. Here on this side of heaven, grace is present. And in this parable, this is the key, right? This is one of your keys here, right? There is a clear absence, neglect of grace that should have been extended toward Lazarus. Remember, the life of Jesus, living as you should and can. There is an absence when Lazarus is here on earth. There is a clear absence, a neglect of grace that should have been extended toward Lazarus. Completely. The other thing to consider in this parable, rich man and Lazarus, along with its two predecessors, the prodigal son and the unjust steward, is that each involve wealth or money. Okay? No, my friends, wealth and money are not evil in and of themselves. There is a larger context. The problem, just as a side note, the problem with material possessions, we're just painting a picture here, right? Just for a moment, give me a moment, is they assume the characteristics. To see, the problem with material possessions is the problem with them is that they begin or can begin to assume the characteristics of a personified force seeking mastery. No doubt, they are necessary to sustain life and can be used to serve God. However, the press for the mastery is always there. Mammon, money, seeks to usurp God's place in one's life. You get it? It begins to blind us. Okay? It seeks to usurp God's place, right? Because we talk a lot or here the kingdom, God's kingdom. God's kingdom is where He rules. Okay? So it seeks to usurp God's place in one's life. Yet there's more, as we're going to see, that relates to this parable, this story, and other teachings. Now, why the mention or addition of money in teachings, and a lot of the teachings, and you're going to see it because we're going to have fun here. Remember, Jesus teaches by using examples or objects in this world in order to help convey a heavenly, a kingdom meaning. All right, back to money. Money is used each day. It's used every day. In reality, money has value no matter what culture or society. past, present, future, here, now, in the US, somewhere in other parts of the world. Money has value. And sometimes it's paper, sometimes it's stone, sometimes it's, metals, okay? Metals, gold, silver, stones, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, okay? Has value. And more so, that's why Jesus introduces and uses it or mentions it in so much of his teachings. The Lord, a little while back gave me this perspective on money, looking at it in a different way, or in a way that really makes sense here. Now, you and I would agree when we talk about grace, like God's grace, right? God's grace, the grace of God. You and I would agree the grace of God makes a difference, right? You would agree to that, right? We all know it does. God's grace makes a difference in our lives, transforms us. It's the grace of God that changes us. We become a new creation. It's his love towards us. It's what he does inside of us in the rebirth, okay? A new creation, being saved, being born again. Whatever biblical words you want to place in there, okay? And each day, the believer, the Christian, grace itself really is the difference. And that grace works out through our lives towards humanity. Okay? Towards God and towards humanity. Okay? Living out our lives as Jesus would do, and Jesus did. See, it's God's grace. You see, you love people because God loves you. I'm not saying you never had any love for people beforehand, but think about it. When Jesus is inside of you, man, you have such great love. You have love that's just, it's heavenly, it's pure, okay? It doesn't have ulterior motives in it. And you and I, for a second, we don't stop to think or stop and think money transforms our lives. Money does transform our lives here in this world. You say, Pastor Vince, how? It does make a difference. And I'm going to show you how it makes a difference. What do you do every day, right? You eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner that otherwise, without money, would not be in our tables, sustaining and keeping our bodies. So money does transform our lives. Because if you don't have no money, you don't eat. If you don't eat, your body's going to become emaciated and it's going to fall to pieces and die. It's not going to live. You see, money has an element to make a difference in our lives. I'm not talking about abuse, but think about it in practical means. Each night, shelter is available, right? To properly rest, sleep, and stay protected from the rain or cold, okay? So you got food for the body, you got shelter to be protected and from the weather and the harm of the weather. And then what do you have? You have clothing. Clothing that keeps us alive, safe, and warm each day. Clothing to protect us and keep us warm, to present ourselves rationally before our fellow man when we're all walking outside. It would be odd walking all around with no clothes on, wouldn't it? People are running the other way, or at least I hope so, in some type of shame. But you know what I'm getting at, right? Keeping us safe and warm. So money is used to transform our lives, generally speaking, and to make our lives better, but not so that we can look better, but because it's an element of God's grace. And this is why Jesus, a lot of times, he'll introduce money into his parables if you don't know it. Money is not the root of all kinds of evil. It's not. Money is not the root of all kinds of evil. The love of money is. The love of money is. And in this parable and others, it is a metaphor and reality, in that it is used to help provide and sustain life. Food, shelter, clothing. In and of itself, it cannot do that. But its value does. You see, it's a metal stone. It's paper money. in and of itself. It doesn't provide and sustain the life. It's not like, the paper, I put it on me and now I'll be great. No, a stone, I carry a stone in my pocket. No, you see, it's not the object itself, it's the value it carries. And guess what? This is the point, a part of the parable. We carry value in God's eyes. We're valuable, we're priceless, that Jesus would die for us, that he says through his grace and his love for us, and this is how we are to be towards one another. We have value. You're worth something. In fact, don't you and I understand that the fact is that if we weren't worth it, he wouldn't have left heaven to come and die for us on our behalf and then give us everything, a brand new life. You see, we're worth something. We are of value to God. Not because you feel like it, not because you've done something for it, but from God's view and perspective. And now that he sent his son is proof in the pudding. And then what? He died, he was buried, and he rose again, right? But the mere fact of these things is the essence of the gospel, that Jesus came and said we are of value, we're worth something. But listen to me. But that means everyone is. You're starting to see a little bit of the story here. We're gonna be unpacking a lot here. So if you think about grace, the kingdom of God, like money, has value. And such value frees and transforms a life. Therefore, this is the reason Jesus introduces money, in order to convey his point. Obviously, we understand grace. The kingdom is an unmerited inheritance. It is. But listen, it's to be shared. That's the key. That's the key in this parable, this story. It's to be shared. Observe, okay? Lazarus and the rich man. Let's make a comparison. The rich man, in this life, right, while he was here, the rich man, he has banquets while he's here. What's Lazarus have while he's here? Pain. While he's here. In the afterlife, Lazarus in death, what's present in eternity? A banquet. A banquet of God's bountiful love. He's in the bosom of Abraham. He's in his bosom. He's not standing next to him. They're not shaking hands. He's leaning in his bosom. A banquet of unending love and joy, of peace and of without neglect. Like being valued, like real time, all the time. You see, there was neglect here, but there is no neglect there. That's a banquet, my friend. In death, the rich man, you see, the roles are reversed. Now he's in pain. Okay, let's tackle it. Come on. Verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. Three quick things. Get that pen and paper. Clothed in purple, a strong and powerful picture of the rich man. See, Jesus doesn't paint a little small line. He brings everything clear into our forefront right away. He paints the picture clear, deep, it's vast. A powerful, clothed in purple, a strong, powerful picture of the rich man. Of course, he has other clothing, but purple was royalty. And purple cloth itself, in that time frame, was expensive. This man wanted to ensure everyone knew he had money. Each day, he was overpowered with the impulse to drive his gold-plated car. I'm using a metaphor. Gold-plated chariot or chariots. Okay? Fine linen. He also wore fine linen. And if you don't know, I'm just going to kind of go in there a little bit, if you don't mind. There's a Greek word called busos, which is translates into Hebrew to butz. Again, this is Dr. Ken Bailey's stuff. This in turn refers to quality Egyptian cotton used for the best underwear. So this dude not only had the best outer clothes, like, his jacket or his robe or whatever else it was, this man wore top quality underwear you don't really get in Walmart, okay? He would not be a regular Joe. And, when you think about when I originally taught and preached on this, I said, I wonder what kind of toilet paper he used, I mean, this guy was relentless, What kind of toilet paper did he use? Feasted sumptuously every day. Okay, now Jesus is putting a little more in here. Jesus is showing us something that's going on, though. He's not just painting us a picture of the rich man. And you're going to get what we're talking about here. But feasted sumptuously every day. Friends, something is missing here. This guy feasted sumptuously every day. Every day. What is missing? What do you think is missing? Observe. Every day. Notice every day. This is Jewish culture. He is some person that's of Hebrew descent in this story. Because remember, Abraham's connected in there, right? Among other things. Observe, the Sabbath is not mentioned. The Sabbath is not mentioned. What this really means, though, in the larger context here, to the eyes of what Jesus is conveying is what? There is no place for God in his life here on earth. There is no place for God in this life here on earth. Friends, in summary, he did not therefore observe the Sabbath. What does that mean as well? His servants were never given a day of rest. He publicly violated the 10 Commandments every week after week after week. His self-indulgent lifestyle was more important to him than the law of God. Now you say, but Pastor Vince, the law, grace. No, listen to me. Even the law of God in the Old Testament connects us to humanity. And of course, at least it should. You say, what do you mean? Well, you go back and read the 10 Commandments. The first 4 are directly about God. When you go from 5 through 10, Commandments 5 through 10 are man's relationship to man. Now, again, they're all meant to be one, right? That's the whole idea. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. Remember, that's not just talking to Jewish people. It's talking to the church, the people, the body. Hear, O Lord, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. How is God one God? Well, you take his commandments. It's not just my relationship to God. It's my relationship to one another. Okay? Consider this. The injustice also that this man inflicted on his staff, because he's not doing the cooking. He ain't doing the prepping. He's doing the eating and celebrating with his friends. The injustice he inflicted on his staff meant nothing to him. Well, you're not giving your servants a rest. What of Lazarus? What would you do for Lazarus? If you're not even doing for people that are right there, and you're not concerned about them, feasted sumptuously every day, right? if you're not concerned about them, what would you have any concern for Lazarus, the rich man? Let's read verses 20 to 21. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. Okay, let's deal with this. At his gate, okay? The rich man had a gate to his property. And as of course, right? The gate has a door. It's not just gated without. It's not that you got to jump the fence. There's a door, okay, to get in and out of that gate, and then that leads eventually to what? The door of his house. Probably more than anything, there might have been a garden around his house, and it was probably an fancy ornamental gate, like with things on it and designs and this and that. But that's the very gate. That's the very gate that opened to the street where Lazarus was laid by his friends. Please keep in mind, my friends, please keep in mind, when you read your Bible, when we're talking about the story, this is not the United States. This is not a large property of 165 acres with a mansion on it. It is not. It is in the land of Israel, where such large landmass is not always comparatively or readily available as it is here in the United States. And by the way, when you read your Bibles, you must not equate its stories and teachings with the life here in the United States. Do not do that. An example, I'll give you a quick few of them. Sometimes when we read the parable of the talents, we think of profits and gains, similar to the free enterprise system that we have here. No, that's not. You got to go back in that time, okay? So this gate would not be far from the rich man's house itself. It's not like, again, a large property and the gate is like, a quarter mile away or, a mile or 2 miles away. No, it's not. It's really not. This gate is not far from the rich man's house itself. And both the rich man and his wealthy guests, if you think about it, right? Now we're getting to the deepness of the story, right? Come with me here. So here you got Lazarus at the gate. He's there and he's laid there by his friends. He's brought there. And it says by the gate. So what does that mean? There's not like all these different gates in that society or culture because, again, landmass, closeness and proximity of places and homes and things like that. Both the rich man and his wealthy guests would pass through this gate, seeing Lazarus there each day. And the story affirms it. It affirms it. And I'll show you this later. So the rich man and his wealthy guests would have to pass through that gate. And as they pass through that gate, they are seeing Lazarus there each day. And those who brought Lazarus to be laid by the gate would not put him in the back alley near somewhere else or even near another gate, right? If you are Lazarus and you have nothing, you're going to be in another gate? No, they're going to put you right where the people are coming in and out. Think about it. You go to places, right? Maybe where the homeless are. Like, for the most part, they're right at door exits, the main one where people are coming in and out, okay? So here's the thing. The purpose is they bring him to a place where those who leave or enter the rich man's dwelling would see Lazarus at the very least, they would always see him. I was going to say more, but I'm going to stop. Okay, let's go. Was laid. Lazarus was laid outside the rich man's gate. What does this mean? He's too sick to walk. The members of the community carried him to the gate every day and returned him to wherever he stayed each night. The community around Lazarus respected and cared for him as best as it could. The dude in town that had the resources to meet his needs, excuse me, was the rich man. So that's why they bring him every day. And the hope that the rich man or his guests would feel, would show, would display compassion toward Lazarus, and in the process, give Lazarus something. You see, we talked about money and value before, right? What value, you see where we're going with this already, what value did they have or place upon this man? Compassion. Feel some compassion. Show, have, express some compassion. Give Lazarus something. Bring him of something value, because that, you see, when you and I give something to others, we are saying something to them that they have value to us and God, or to God and us. That's what we're saying. You give a cup of water to the person that's thirsty, whether they ask for it or not, you give it to them. That's Matthew chapter 25. Whether they're hungry, thirsty, naked, sick, in prison, whether they ask for it or not, you go to them. Or let's take it back to anybody that may be broken or down and out or hurting, my friends. Okay, this is not strictly like, oh, you're talking about a homeless ministry. Well, first of all, that's not true. And Jesus doesn't dichotomize things saying, well, this ministry is a homeless. This is a ministry for the homeless. He never says that. Stop. He doesn't say that. Jesus didn't have a special ministry for prostitutes. He introduced them, he brought the kingdom to them, and he integrated them into the kingdom. Okay? I'm not saying there's ministries that do that stuff. What I'm saying to you, though, is that we make everything a ministry thought or mind skew or paradigm, and in many ways we make excuses, and we, like these stories in the Bible, we wind up doing nothing for anybody. And that's what Jesus is trying to teach us. Desired to be fed, covered with sores, Lazarus was too weak to work or sit up, and he desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Remember the parable of the prodigal son? In Luke chapter 15, verse 16, we read that, right? He desired to eat the very pods he was feeding the pigs. In the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, food was thrown away in the rich man's house, but was not given to Lazarus. Because it says, desire to be fed from the rich man's table. He had it, but rather than, hey, come on, you can't give the dude leftovers or what you didn't eat yet. No, you threw it out in the garbage. Because yourself, you had no value for this man. The only value you had was self-value. And that's not God. You see, when the Bible speaks about denying ourselves, it's not talking about you can't enjoy a movie, you can't enjoy a nice meal. It's talking about you're not your own. You belong to God. And you live as one that belongs to God, that you have a love for humanity, that you value what God values. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense? Right? It's not, I can't enjoy a movie, I can't enjoy the ocean, I can't enjoy the beach, I can't enjoy a nice show. That's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying at all. When Jesus talks about denying himself, he says, you're not your own. Are you under your own authority, or are you under God's authority? And if you really understand what Christ has done in you, you understand that we are under his authority and we value what God values. But if you don't take initiative to value what God values, guess what? You will only always value yourself more than others. You will. You just will. And believe me, I didn't say you don't value yourself. You don't take that the wrong way. But too much is more about us than it is about others. You want to live a joyful life? You want to live a life that you learns God, knows God? You know, I want to hear God. Well, do you do the things of God? Do you do the things of God? I want to walk with God. I want to, I want to know him. I want to do things for, well, do you walk with him? Okay, let's go. And it's the same scene that appears in the account of Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman. Remember, she pleads to be given the small pieces of bread, which after the meal are thrown to the dogs. Lazarus longs for the remainders of the meal that fall from the rich man's table. They were not given to him, but think about it, worse yet. Okay, they were thrown out, but anything that they didn't even want to throw out, you know what they did? They gave it to the dogs instead of Lazarus. The dog was more worth to them, his dogs. And back then in that culture, we're going to get this, dogs were not dogs in homes as pets. They were guard dogs. They were outside. He knew Lazarus was outside. They all knew Lazarus was outside. But the dogs had more value to them than the man did. Folks, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Dogs, okay? I'm getting to that. See, I got ahead of myself, but let me cover it. Remember, Lazarus was not able to walk, but he also had sores. He had sores. In this life, the rich man's guard dogs attended to Lazarus. See, so the dogs are fed, and yet the dogs that are fed, rather than growl, bark, or try to attack Lazarus, they're drawn to him. They extend, the dogs, the guard dogs, extended unmerited grace, value. The dog showed value to Lazarus. You see, everything in life speaks of how we should live and what we can and should live. They extended unmerited grace with love and compassion toward him. The dog's saliva, if you don't know that, the saliva is like a peptide. It's like an antibiotic. They sought to lick, to heal his wounds. And you see not just the sores on his arm, the sore in his heart of neglect, of lack of love, of consideration and concern. Isn't it sad? And yet the irony here, the owners, the owner, the rich man, the owners, his own dogs provide more mercy, healing, compassion than the rich man himself. So what am I saying? I'm saying, in other words, the animals showed the compassion he never exhibited. Let's do some other considerations here. These things are true. A, there are some people who suffer more than others. There are. You know, and we're going to get to this in a second, though. B, there are people who face challenges others do not. Now, I'm going to get these. I'm going to tackle this now. Here's false formulas, okay? Some false things. There is no indication wealth is necessarily tied or necessarily equal to God's blessings in a person's life. There is no indication wealth necessarily equals God's blessing. If that is the case, this child or son of Abraham would not have wound up in torment. Does that make sense to us? See, sometimes we want to equate, wealth and health or money with God's blessings in our lives. Well, if that's the case, why does he wind up in torment? 2, suffering always equates with sin, or you must have sinned. Well, Lazarus would not have wound up in the bosom of Abraham if that was true. See, so Lazarus' condition is not necessarily a result of sin. He's out on the gate. Okay? His friends brought him there. Suffering is not always related to sin or you must have sinned. If that's the case, why, when he dies, why does he wind up in the bosom of Abraham? Sin cannot dwell with God in eternity. He winds up in the bosom of Abraham. So these are false notions, okay? And at times, and I'm guilty of it too here, we develop compassion fatigue, okay? When you go in Starbucks, you first smell the coffee. 5 minutes later, you smell nothing. I'm using it as a metaphor there. You know, what's around us we forget. I do too. I'm not saying I don't. We misunderstand grace and our mission, though. Our mission is humanity. People are within our reach, but sometimes we believe our task is to fix them. Excuse me. I got to get the pages here. And sometimes we send people a mixed message about grace and love and about the grace of God and our love for people. Hey, I've got this new brand. Hey, I have this nice brand new car for you for free. I got for free. I'm telling you for free. It's a top Volvo, right? That's how you say it. Volvo SUV, and it's for free. It's for free. Here's the keys, and you take the keys, and as you start it up, and then just about you knock on, you use the owner. You knock on the window, and you say, "Just pay me $200 a month until it's paid in full." That's how we mix grace. And we send people mixed messages. We tell them of the grace, power, love, and healing of Christ is available to them, but then we tell them, but it's because of this or that or this or that. We place all these conditions on them or before them. Think of this parable. What is available to both men? It never tells us how the rich man earned his wealth. But you notice, it appears it was given to him. It was given to him. It's an act of grace. In contrast, or in similar manner, I should say, not necessarily, Lazarus, does Lazarus need to do anything to earn such money? Should he? Notice, eternity welcomes him with open arms, no strings attached or conditions that need to be met. So in that case, when he's in the bosom of Abraham, it's a picture of grace, since heaven is willing to accept him while the rich man is not. You see, God's grace is free. And while we have it, or we have the opportunity of everything within our means, what do we do with what's in our means? To show love, to show concern, to show compassion, to live as we should, to live as Jesus in this world toward humanity. Are we too busy with ourselves? We can see the rich man's rejection of grace. There is no place for God in his life, and it is more obvious in both his neglect and, as we shall see, his treatment of Lazarus. His treatment of Lazarus. Are we starting to see, my friends, that how we treat each other in this life can and will in fact affect our destination in the afterlife? And there's a strong reason for that. Jesus is conveying something of extreme importance in this parable. Now, I'm not saying treating your neighbor earns you eternity with God. I'm not saying that. But we have a responsibility. Remember, God is looking for people that are going to reflect his son in this world. Friends, and some people get bent out of shape. Well, that sounds like legalism. That sounds like, bondage. Look what Jesus has done for you. He's unshackled you from bondage. You can't love people? Really? Come on, folks. Why can't we? Why can't we? Oh, but I'm not perfect. Wait a minute. The God who knows you perfectly loves you perfectly. He's not waiting for you to have everything in order and for you never to make a mistake. No, he's looking for you to live and reflect his son in this world. Jesus paid for your imperfection, go and love humanity. If you need to be perfect, then you know what? You have to count on yourself, and I have to count on myself, which ain't happening and ain't going to work. We all know that, right? Because when we do, nothing goes right. No, I count on his perfect work. You're perfect because God's made you perfect. Oh, but I make mistakes. Okay, but isn't the blood, the forgiveness of Christ? He says, their lawless deeds and their sins and their lawless deeds, I'll remember no more. God does not impute sin back to you, and you don't lose your justification when you make a mistake. Committing and practicing is a whole nother issue. I'm talking about when you make a mistake. Jesus is conveying something of extreme importance in this parable. Did you ever notice or consider none of the characters? I want you to notice this. Did you ever consider that none of the characters in Jesus' other parables have a name? None of them. Lazarus is the only one with a name in all of his teachings. All of them. Major characters move in and out of parables, but are not identified by name. The Good Samaritan, the lawyer, the priest, the Levite, the older son and brother, and the prodigal, the parable son, the parable of debtors, the laborers, the sower. All of Jesus, he does not ever mention or go out of his way in his teaching to identify the person with or by name in any of his teachings like that, with stories and parables really. Okay, Lazarus is the sole exception. Okay, my friends, it's getting late. I could finish up. I'm almost done because we'll do part 2 on Thursday. Lazarus is the sole exception, and therefore his name must be significant. Excuse me. The name Lazarus is a Hebrew word that means the one whom God helps. You may say, well, it don't sound like you helped him. Listen to me, though. Listen. We blame God for so many things, right? I'm not saying you guys, but like people blame God for so many things, right? Lazarus lay day after day at the rich man's gate and perhaps may have had a few scraps thrown to him, maybe once in a while. I'll give the dude the benefit of the doubt. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But he's always hungry. He's so sick he could not stand, and so poor he was reduced to begging. He appears to be a person whom God did not help, but he, like you and I, have value. The love and power of God's grace, it's God's way of saying you have value. You do count for something. Like the rich man's money and wealth count for something and have value. The rich man's wealth, it counts for something, it has value, because he wouldn't be able to have these banquets and these feasts every day. So does Lazarus in the eyes of the Lord. So does every individual in the eyes of the Lord. Listen to me. Proof in the pudding. By Lazarus being in Abraham's bosom is a message to the rich man. We didn't get to this. This is our second part. By Lazarus being in Abraham's bosom is a message to the rich man that God values him. And you and I are held in the same way in the arms of God. In life, sometimes we seem to sit. We do. We seem to sit by the gate on the outside. That's not God, that's people. Perhaps left out or unimportant. Sometimes others seem to be feasting while we are missing our portion. We have a name like Lazarus, one whom God helps. I just want to end with this. Our value, like Lazarus, is more than the wealth of the rich man. My friends, it's getting late. I love you very much. Tune in Thursday, part 2. Come back. I love you very much, and we shall talk soon. Consider this. Watch the video again. There's like a YouTube channel, Grace and Passion. You might have to just search around my last name. Love you very much, and we'll talk soon. I'm putting them up slowly, but this one you can rewatch again here on Facebook for now. But they're going up slowly. Thank you. Lots of love, everyone. Bye.